Well, good afternoon, colleagues. Very pleased to be able to welcome you here today on this gloomy October afternoon. Delighted to welcome you all to our October Cabinet meeting. Members, you will recall that due to the unfortunate circumstances around Her Majesty's sad death, we rescheduled our meeting. So there are a number of items on our agenda today that have been rolled over from that meeting. So we do have a considerable agenda before us today. So we'll start with item 1 then, apologies for absence, and we've got apologies from the Deputy Leader, haven't we? Okay. Are there any declarations of interest? Thank you. So item 3 then are the minutes from our July Cabinet meeting. These are available on pages 3 to 14 of the packs. Have members, I hope that you've all had an opportunity to read them. So, are members content to move these as a true record?
Happy to confirm, Leader.
Yeah, happy to second.
Okay, thank you very much for that. We move then to item number 4 on our agenda today. And this is the July 2022 Revenue Budget Monitor report. This report is on pages 15 to 36 of the packs that we have before us. And colleagues, both colleagues actually and officers who are part of the meeting today, I do think that it's really important that everyone pays particular attention to this report and certainly the emerging challenges that we're starting to face as a local authority. So this is the first revenue monitor that's been presented to Cabinet this financial year, and it explains the current forecast position of the authority as at July 2022. Now, against a net budget of £343 million, the July revenue budget currently forecasts an overspend of £3.1 million. This represents around a 1% variance against our budget, and this overspend is after the use of all revenue budget contingencies of £4.9 million included in the 22-23 revenue budget as agreed by Cabinet in February 2022. So I cannot emphasise strongly enough the financial pressures that the authority is experiencing at the moment. And I think that's evidenced by the report that we have before us. Now, as reflected in the 2022-23 budget report and the 21-22 outturn report, this financial year presented the potential for more stability relative to the last 2 years, with the effects of COVID potentially set to ease. However, it was known that the Welsh Government Hardship Fund would end, and therefore any costs associated with recovery after that and challenges experienced in achieving historic income levels would fall upon the council. So we were aware going into this, colleagues, that we would face challenges going forward. Despite having established sizable budget contingencies for the 22-23 year to deal with legacy impacts relating to COVID, crucially, 2 new issues have emerged since the budget was agreed. These issues are the provisional NJC and teachers' pay offer for 22-23, which is higher than the provision which we initially allowed for. So this is an average of 4% higher for NJC and 1% higher for teachers. In addition to this, over the last 6 months, we've experienced unprecedented inflationary increases. These continue to increase and they've impacted on our budget. For example, the fuel increases, major contract increases such as school transport. And whilst officers continue to try to manage these within existing resources, it nonetheless presents a challenge. Now, as shown in the report and the appendices, coupled with the pay award impact, the current position can be explained in the following way. There is significant overspending in some key demand areas and also other emerging risks within service areas. These have been partially offset by savings against revenue budget contingencies, which have been made available to the Council, and the Council Tax Reduction Scheme and other non-service budgets. Now, colleagues, some areas throughout the authority are reporting significant overspends against specific activities. These overspends relate to demand-led activity areas such as social services, and therefore there is an inherent risk that they may change should demand levels change from current forecasts during the remainder of the year. And it is critically important that we are mindful of that going forwards. Now, the key areas contributing to the 3.1 million forecast position include an increased demand across key social care areas, including children's out area and emergency placements. These two areas alone contribute to an overspend of almost £2.9 million to the overall service position. The national employers agreed a one-year final offer to the trade unions representing the NJC workforce. The average increase for council staff will be in the region of 8%, compared to only 4% in the budget. And whilst this is yet to be agreed, it represents a forecast overspend of £2.4 million for non-school-based staff. Furthermore, there are significant pressures within housing and communities in relation to homelessness. Within this service area, an overspend of £2.9 million is forecast. And the main issues that underpin this are the large number of individuals and households accommodated in temporary accommodation, reflecting a continuation of the position from the COVID period, the lack of suitable accommodation options resulting in significant use of hotel and bed and breakfast options at a higher cost than most traditional options. This is exacerbated by the cap on housing benefit subsidy, resulting in only a proportion of these costs being covered by the Department for Work and Pensions. In addition to these continued risks, there are also issues that have emerged this year that will need to continue to be closely monitored. These include, but are not restricted to, education, transport, which is forecasting a £200,000 overspend due to higher operator costs due to inflation, and also a £255,000 car parking income fee shortfall. The anticipated overspend in these areas of emerging risk is expected to be around £500,000 by the end of the financial year. There's an anticipated shortfall against the delivery of 21-22 and prior year savings of around £600,000. Now, this is largely due to delays in progressing the necessary actions, some of which are a result of the pandemic. Whilst the level of unachieved savings in relation to the current financial year is lower than in previous years, there remains a need to ensure that all savings are delivered in full as soon as possible, and our officers continue to take action to ensure that these are delivered at the earliest opportunity. Now, underspending against both the core revenue contingency budget and the other temporary contingencies does provide mitigation against serviced area overspending. The forecast underspend of £4.7 million is shown against non-service budgets. In addition, there's a forecast underspend of £1.2 million against the Council Tax Reduction Scheme budget. I'd like now to turn to schools. And as the report highlights, overall, schools are anticipating a net overspend of £6.1 million. As well as the impact of a higher pay offer compared to the budget increase provided, schools are also drawing down on reserves built up over the previous 2 years as they move to catch up and strengthen provision after the impacts of COVID. In comparison to previous years, whilst no councils have schools No schools have set a deficit budget. There are a number of schools that are at risk of entering a deficit position once the impact of the pay awards is reflected in individual school forecasts. And colleagues, we're all school governors, and I think we all recognise the pressures that puts on school budgets. Overall, the current position on school balances represents a significant change from the concerns evident in previous financial years. The overall surplus position is projected to total 9.7 million and appears set to continue for at least the next financial year. It is important, however, that there remains a focus on school budgets to ensure that as much as possible a return to the previous position is avoided. This must be balanced with trying to avoid a situation whereby balances could be considered excessive and will therefore be a key consideration when setting future budgets and reviewing the medium-term financial plan. And I said at the outset of the meeting, colleagues, that this report is one of a number of reports that was delayed because of the recent national experiences that we've had. But as the first reported revenue budget of the year, it's clearly subject to change as the year progresses and new issues and opportunities emerge. At this point, the issues that give rise to individual significant overspending are known with certainty, and the values attributed are realistic. However, clearly the position currently being reported is concerning, and it is important that every effort is made to bring the position back towards a balanced position by the end of the year. In an effort to achieve this, services will continue to robustly review their forecasts and identify ways to mitigate the overspends, such as identifying in-year savings and managing any new pressures within existing resources as much as is practically possible. As well as having a focus on the in-year position, will also be important for services to understand any longer-term impacts of the challenges being faced and identify strategies for minimising these impacts. This is because there is already a challenging outlook for the medium term, and any further financial issues will only add to that challenge. And that's a deeply sobering introduction, I would suggest, colleagues, to the report that we need to discuss today. And at this point, I'll just pause and open for discussion before we conclude. So would anybody like to comment? Councillor Marshall.
Thank you very much, Leader, for bringing me in. As you've already highlighted, the report does include figures from Children's Social Services. I'd like to note that the vast amount of great work is undertaken by officers who are seeking to reduce this where possible, but obviously experiencing challenges within that. But it's always about focusing on a love, caring and warm environment and approach, making homes a home. And as you know, Leader, that we're in the process of opening a long-term project in Windmill Farm, which I know you visited recently with the Minister, which will assist in basically providing that placement allocation that is much needed. This, amongst other plans, are awaiting news on bids within the Welsh Government, which will aid in tackling this challenge. And I would note, cheekily if allowed, to shout out about the Rosedale property as well. Again, award-winning work under the challenging circumstances that we face. And obviously I know that the area does come under the corporate risk as well, but just wanted to highlight the fantastic work, but also within the challenges that we face. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Marshall, and I'm really pleased to hear you highlight the role that the transformation of children's services can play within this in terms of building resilience into the system. So thank you very much for highlighting that for us today. Councillor Batruni.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you for delivering what is a sobering report. It's good to have solid stability, stable leadership at a time of national turbulence. And I just want to, as a new member to Newport Council, I want to praise the previous Cabinet and the schools in Newport for having some reserves, being able to cope with some of this pressure. It can't cope with all of it, but it's important to note that there was some prudent thinking before this crisis hit, and it's important to acknowledge that. I also want to praise, at significant cost to the council, that the pay deal, average of 8%, but the lowest earners will be earning over 10% if the deal is agreed. And that's this council acknowledging that people are suffering out there and our staff are suffering out there with the cost of living crisis. And although it adds a financial pressure to us, we're determined to help and support our staff where we can. And it's important to note that, even though it adds a lot of pressure to ourselves. I also want to make a comment around homeless provision, and it's a sobering figure, 2.7 million. And I know our Cabinet member, Councillor Clark, is doing an amazing job at dealing with just a tsunami of problems. But it's important to note how we're not being helped by the UK government. The mini budget was a catastrophe, and that's not just a political point. By any standard, it's a catastrophe. The Financial Times, which last time I checked wasn't a lefty, wokey, liberal newspaper, have criticised the budget. Every think tank you can think of have criticised the budget. And homelessness, it's important to know, is only set to get worse because of a deliberate failure at UK government. They increased borrowing, unfunded borrowing, at a time when the national budget was in a perilous state, which has led to the Bank of England trying to cope by increasing rates, trying to control inflation and stabilise the markets worldwide, which is increasing mortgage rates for every house owner in Newport now, at a time when they can least afford it. It's hitting with mortgage withdrawals over the last couple of weeks for people trying to get on the housing ladder, with people trying to remortgage. It's affecting your household budgets now, and it's deliberately down to the UK government. There's no bones about it. They'll blame the Welsh government, and we'll hear them all on the radio now. It is deliberately down to UK government. It's a self-inflicted wound, and it's councils like us who have to pick up the social consequence of those idiotic, and that's a harsh word, idiotic decisions. And so it's important to raise that point. And just on that point, at a time in inflation, which is causing huge concern across all councils, not only in Wales, but across the country, the Bank of England is trying to increase rates to curb inflation, trying to offload its borrowing on its own balance sheet, at a time when the government is increasing borrowing and exacerbating inflation. It's like someone trying to speed with their brakes fully down. It's madness. It's economic madness. And again, it's local authorities like ours, Leader, that pick up the social consequences. And I can't emphasise that enough. And we need to make it clear to the UK government, you need to change direction, otherwise people are going to really suffer. And as councils struggle to deliver the services, it's on their heads.
Absolutely. You're absolutely right there, Councillor Batrouni. And it does create a perilous situation, as you rightly say. And in March of this year, this full council passed a motion agreeing that we should write to the then Prime Minister seeking support for the cost of living crisis. How disappointing it is that we're here today having these conversations and we can only see the reckless behaviour of the most senior politicians in the UK and the level of ignorance, I think, in terms of the situation that we face is just incredulous. Honestly, it really is. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Leader. Really touching on my fellow colleague has just mentioned, that we have many challenges ahead, both for us and the residents of Newport. These are tough times and will be happening throughout Wales and the UK, but people have to remember what the UK government have done here. And it's very interesting, it was mentioned that we've got stable leadership in Newport. I'll then go on to the new leadership of the Conservative Party in Westminster. I think we can say it's far from that. But the effect it has had on the UK and the effect it's having, I fear for the times which we're going to go through. I fear that people are going to experience times which they've never experienced before. And it's worrying, but people need to remember where this has come from. And what I would say, and again repeating what my fellow colleague said, is thank God we've got stable leadership in Newport. because hopefully that will see us through. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Clark, and I think you've articulated there the fears that are shared by many of our citizens across Newport. Thank you for that very sobering comment there. I've got Councillor Fawsey and then Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Leader. I was listening to First Minister's questions yesterday, and it was an extraordinary, sobering experience. He talked about 15% cuts in public expenditure, 15% cuts in departmental budgets, and thousands of people losing their jobs. Inflation is up, mortgages are up, costs are up, pensions are down, wages are down. This is a very serious situation. This is worse than any austerity we have yet seen. It's going to be serious consequences for everybody in the country. I think we're only just beginning to appreciate the scale of the problems ahead of us. It's extremely worrying times. Yes, we are grateful for the stable leadership that we have in Wales. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Fawsey. Thank you. Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Leader. I obviously concur with everything my colleagues have already said. But what struck me today on Prime Minister's questions was not one question was answered. She waffled and waffled and then waffled again. Look at me, I'm a superhero. I've put a cap on your energy. Brilliant. What about those people who began a mortgage at 4% before it's even gone through and finalised? It's now 6.5%. £500 a month. The last time things went like this, it was in the 80s, and a woman came on TV and said, if your neighbour has not collected their milk from their doorstep, please knock on the door and check. That was Margaret Thatcher asking neighbours to check on old people to see if they had died through the night after eating cat food because they couldn't afford food. They couldn't heat their homes. Oh well, knit yourself a bobble hat. Well, thanks very much. Thank you, central government, for absolutely decimating people's lives. They have no idea what it is in the real world when all of us, as ward members, have gone to our local supermarkets asking can they give us a donation so we can feed the most vulnerable on our estates. Shame on them.
Absolutely, Councillor Harvey, and I think you identify there really something that none of us ever, recognising that some people in this room won't have lived through that experience. It is an experience that a number of us had hoped never to go through it again. So thank you for really emphasising that. Any further colleagues? Any colleagues wish to make any further comments on this particular report? Councillor Lacey.
Thank you, Leader. I just wanted to add, obviously, my other colleagues have come out with what they've already said, but I think it's prudent that we've got this monitor and the work that's gone into this monitor. And I believe as well that it's not, we're at a time where this is not just our most vulnerable that are going to be feeling this. It's our people that have never really needed us before, but the people who now have £500 more a month of a mortgage payment for nothing, who also have £300 more a month on their fuel costs. It's not just our most vulnerable anymore. It's and everybody in this city. I don't know, there are not many people that I would know that can absorb £1,000 worth of cost. And it's good to know that as a council, we are looking after everybody. We are making sure that everything's covered. Our 8% pay rise, if that goes through, you know, this is for everybody, not now, which is awful, not now just our most vulnerable, but all of our residents. And it's good to see it in there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lacey, and again, a very, very important point made there. Okay, any further comments? So I'll just move to the recommendations there of this report. And Colleagues, it's proposed that we note the overall budget forecast position resulting from the issues that are included in the report and the potential for an overspend position to exist at the end of the financial year. That we agree that the Chief Executive and the Executive Board instigate specific measures to manage the overall forecast within the core revenue budget, including revenue budget contingencies. That we note the risks identified throughout the report and in the Head of Finance comments, particularly in relation to the Teachers and NJC pay awards, in relation to homelessness and the lasting impacts of the pandemic. That we note the forecast movements in reserves and note the overall position in relation to schools when compared to previous years, but also note the risk that deficit positions could emerge in the future if good financial management and planning is not undertaken. Colleagues, is somebody content to move the report? Thank you.
Moved.
Everyone happy with that? Thank you. And once again, thank you all for your very considered contributions to that particular item. I do appreciate the level of thought that you all put into this. The next item is item number 5. This is the capital programme monitoring. And again, this is the delayed quarter one report. And it's on pages 37 to 64 of the packs that we've received. Now, this report provides an overview of the updated capital budgets for this financial year and the remainder of the capital programme window, alongside the projected outturn position as of July this year. This represents the first capital monitoring report of the 22-23 financial year, and as previously mentioned, we understand the reasons for the delay with this. So, in relation to the capital budget then, the last report received by Cabinet was the 21-22 outturn report, which identified the total capital budget heading into 22-23. At that point in time, the total budget for this year was £117.4 million, which would have represented a significant increase in levels of spend compared with previous years. Therefore, an exercise to review the anticipated profile of spend for each scheme has been undertaken by officers over the summer, with the aim of ensuring that a more realistic starting budget was reported against during the year. Now, the culmination of this exercise was that a total of £51.8 million has been reprofiled into future years. And it's hoped by undertaking this exercise and reducing the 22-23 budget, the levels of slippage reported throughout the year will be reduced in comparison to previous years. Now, in addition to the reprofiling exercise, there's been a number of additions and amendments made to the programme. Now, most of these relate to the addition of specific grant-funded schemes, and these total £25.55 million, which are detailed in Appendix A, and impact across multiple financial years, with £15.8 million added to 22-23 alone. We as a Cabinet are being asked to approve these additions to the programme. The total net impact of these additions and revisions are to reduce the total budget for 22-23 to £81.4 million. In a change to previous years, Cabinet are not being asked to approve slippage at this stage of the year. Instead, slippage will be identified in each monitoring report, and only in the final report of the year will we be asked to approve a total amount to be transferred to future years. The intention of this is that it will give greater clarity and accountability, as reports will be against a fixed budget rather than one that moves on a quarterly basis. Now, against the revised budget of £81.4 million in 22-23, the expenditure totalling £80.9 million is projected. This variance is comprised of £433,000 of slippage and £106,000 of true net underspends and overspends. This level of slippage being reported is considerably lower than in previous years because of the reprofiling exercise that I've just mentioned. Therefore, there's no major items of slippage to outline at this stage. However, a number of schemes requiring close monitoring are highlighted, colleagues, for our information. And these include the Transporter Bridge and the Leisure Centre, where the risk of further delays could, of course, result in slippage being identified later in the year. The report also outlines the current position in relation to the available capital headroom. Having been updated for a recent new commitment and an equivalent increase in resources, the total headroom still stands at 2.354 million, comprises of the following: 57,000 borrowing headroom, 258,000 uncommitted capital expenditure reserve, and 2.039 million of uncommitted capital receipts. The balance of headroom available takes account of commitments already reflected within the capital programme, as well as 2 provisional commitments in relation to the Council's share of the demolition costs for Newport Centre, and additional funding to take the overall Band B funding envelope to 90 million. The latter, of course, being detailed within the report. This overall amount of headroom, which has steadily reduced over recent years, will need to be carefully managed and monitored to ensure that it can be utilised when needed for the most critical issues prior to the new capital programme coming into existence in 23-24. This need for careful monitoring and prioritisation of resources is heightened considerably in relation to the challenges currently being faced regarding rising construction industry costs and the competing priorities for capital resources. Now, colleagues, at this stage, that concludes the overview of the report, and I'd just like to pause there and invite any comments before we move to the recommendations. Would anybody like to comment on this report? Councillor Batruni.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, it's important to recognise what the Council is still spending. Although times are tough, and although we have to make reprofiling, and that's prudence, that's sound economic management, we're still spending projected £37 million in the education service area, £15 million still in regeneration and development. We're still investing in this city, still investing in education. So although it is a dire economic situation out there, Newport's still investing in our city because we believe in our city and we believe in our education services. And we're just soundly considering all capital projects and everything that goes with it going forward. And that's still commitment to Band B funding for our schools, which I believe is Baysleg Secondary School. So it helps. It's delivering key capital projects that delivers better services to the residents of Newport out there. So it's important to emphasise that point, Leader. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Batruni, and it's really good to hear you restating our continued commitment to investment in the City of Newport, and we will continue to do all that we can within the resources that are available to us to do this, because we really want to take forward the city and deliver better opportunities for our citizens. Would anybody else like to comment on this item? No? Okay. So we move then to the recommendations, and colleagues, we're being asked to approve the additions outlined in Appendix A, to note the projected outturn position and note the amount of headroom still available. Are colleagues content with that report? Is there somebody happy to move it?
Happy to move, Leader.
Seconder? Everyone all right with that? Yay! Thanks, everybody. Thank you. And once again, thank you for your continued support and commitment. Now, we've had those 2 finance items, and I know Councillor Lacey touched on this, but I would like to, again, reiterate this. Whilst we're here discussing this information today, there are teams of officers who are working really hard to ensure that we maintain a prudent financial management across the whole of the authority, and officers doing their absolute best to work within extreme external pressures on their service areas. So I'm sure colleagues on behalf of us all, I'd just like to thank officers for their contributions to that before we move on, because Chief Executive, we do value the contributions that our officers make. We move then to item number 6, the Corporate Risk Register update, and this is on pages 65 to 112 of the packs that we've had presented to us. And I think, colleagues, as we go through this, it will become evident that the escalated risks should come as no surprise in the current context. So it's an update of our corporate risk register for the end of Q1. And as you'll be aware, Cabinet members have been asked to consider the contents of the report and continue the monitoring of the risks and the actions being taken to address the risks identified. The Council's Risk Management Policy and Corporate Risk Register enables this administration and officers to effectively identify, manage and monitor these risks, which could prevent us from achieving our strategic priorities and to undertake our statutory duties as a local authority. The Q1 risk report will also be presented to our Governance and Audit Committee to review our risk management process and governance arrangements. So it's excellent to see those checks and balances in place in relation to the management of risk across the authority. Now, at the end of Q1, the Council had 44 risks recorded across our 8 service areas. And these are risks that are deemed to pose the most significant risk in the delivery of the Council's corporate plan, and as such, these are escalated to the risk register for monitoring. At the end of Q3, 16 risks were recorded in the corporate risk register. 8 of these were severe risks and 8 major. There has been some change of direction in relation to risk scores now, and in comparison to Q4, there were no new or escalated risks and no risks were closed. 14 risks remained at the same score as Q4, and 1 risk score increased and 1 risk score decreased. And I'd like to focus really on the change of direction in our risk score, because as colleagues will be aware from the items that we've just discussed here today, the medium-term financial plan has recently been updated for the first time since the 22-23 budget was set. Due to the current inflationary crisis, it is evident that cost pressures will increase substantially in comparison with the original assumptions. Costs such as pay, energy and commission services are all forecast to increase in price significantly. In addition, services have identified pressures in a number of areas, especially those connected with demand and capacity within services. The funding assumptions remain largely unchanged, and therefore there is the potential for a significant budget gap. This budget gap will be very challenging to address, especially in light of the level of savings that have already been identified and achieved in previous years. So just considering that, just pausing to consider that for a moment, colleagues, that risk score has increased from 9 to 12. And we need to continue to monitor that very carefully indeed. Another change in terms of the risk score, this time in terms of a decrease, is the COVID-19 pandemic. And whilst COVID remains a risk and is monitored through the Council's Strategic Gold Group, the overall impact on services has reduced. Now, at the end of Q1, the risk has reduced to reflect this. However, of course, we still have to monitor the impact of this on service areas, including staff absences as well. So I'd just like to pause at this point and invite any comments from colleagues on this Corporate Risk Register report. Would anybody like to comment? Councillor Petruni.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Leader. I just want to talk about the cybersecurity risk, which is red, and just to emphasise we are in unusually troubled times with Ukraine, Russia invasion of Ukraine, and Britain's actively being attacked by hackers, maybe sponsored by a state, and as a council, we're acutely aware of that. You'll see it as in red. And it's in red because we are very conscious of the fact. We are vigilant to that fact. And we're trying to mitigate that as much as humanly possible. But we're also recognising these are very clever individuals who are highly determined. And so we have to be very conscious and realistic of that red status. And I know we're going for review now, and we're going an external review from Welsh Audit, and we're also reviewing all our internal procedures as well, and our relations with SRS. And this is important to always be vigilant to the ongoing risks. And I just want to explain why that's in red.
Thank you, Councillor Petruni. And that example actually gives, I feel, that example provides a high level of assurance to us all and to the public that the risks that we face are being mitigated and managed very, very carefully within the authority. And it is really good to hear that level of awareness that exists across the Cabinet in relation to risk management. So thank you very much for providing us with an example of that. Any further comments from colleagues? Okay. Somebody happy to... thank you, Councillor Petruni. Councillor Harvey, thank you. Everyone okay? Yeah. Thank you. Thanks very much. Shall we move on? Let's move on then to item number 7 on our agenda today, and this is our corporate plan for 2022 to 27. And the report on this is available in pages 113 to 134 of your packs today, colleagues. Now, this is an update on the development of our Newport City Council's corporate plan for 22 to 27. And the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act requires Newport City Council to produce a corporate plan which sets out how the Council will carry out sustainable development to improve Wales' economic, social, environmental and cultural wellbeing and its 7 wellbeing goals. The previous corporate plan, 2017 to 2022, set out the Council's commitment to build on success and build a better Newport. The last 2.5 years of that plan's delivery has taken place against the backdrop of 2 major global events, the COVID pandemic and more recently the cost of living crisis. Despite these challenges, Newport City Council and its partners has continued to deliver change and deliver service improvements. Further details will be presented to us as a Cabinet next month as part of the Council's annual report. Now, the corporate plan for 2022 to 2027 is currently in development. And over the next 5 to 20 years, Newport is expected to see significant change, and we must consider the opportunities that will improve the well-being of the city, provide economic growth, and support cohesive and safe communities. There will also be many challenges and changes that Newport will have to prepare for and adapt to, such as climate change, sustainability of services, technological change, and the ongoing need to provide necessary services for our most vulnerable and disadvantaged communities. In the development of this plan, Newport City Council has considered priorities at the national level, at Welsh Government level, at the regional level, so Cardiff Capital Region, and at the local level. And at the local level, that embraces the manifesto commitments made by this Labour administration. Over the next 5 years, our 4 wellbeing objectives will focus on Newport as a thriving and growing city that offers excellent education and aspires to provide opportunities for all. A city that seeks to protect and enhance our environment whilst reducing our carbon footprint and preparing for a sustainable and digital future. where Newport is a supportive city, where communities and care are at the heart of what we do. Where Newport City Council is an inclusive organisation that places social value, fairness and sustainability at its core. Now, in September, colleagues, the Council's Overview and Scrutiny Management Committee scrutinised these draft wellbeing objectives. This information is included in the report, and there's an opportunity for us to discuss this. And I'm sure the Cabinet will welcome the positive feedback from the committee on the objectives and take this into consideration before the final version of the plan is agreed. Residents have also been asked their views on the corporate plan wellbeing objectives and their importance in the delivery of services. And the results have shown over 70% of residents considered the 4 objectives to be either very important or important to Newport. Now, as I mentioned previously, a final version of this plan will be presented to us as Cabinet in November, and that final version will then go on to be presented to full Council before being published in Welsh and English to our residents. So today, colleagues, we're being asked to agree the key principles of the draft corporate plan and its ongoing development in preparation for consideration in full, the final plan in November. And I think at this stage, I'll just pause to ask colleagues for contributions. Would anybody like to comment on the corporate plan? Councillor Lacey.
Thank you, Leader. I just wanted to say that this is a progressive and well thought out document. And what I want our residents to know is it's not just there as a tick box exercise. These are the objectives that we live by. And for example, if I look at myself, wellbeing objective number 3, Newport is a supportive city where communities and care are at the heart of what we do. And I think in the last 12 months, or actually through COVID, we've shown that that is the case. Although in the last year we've had the Afghan resettlement scheme, we've opened our doors to the Ukrainian refugees, and myself personally have been involved in Pride in the Port, which was a massive inclusion exercise, and it had real buy-in from the Council, from ourselves and from our partners. So I just think looking through this document, it's what we do, it's what we live and what we breathe as a Council, to be there for our residents. And like I said, it's not just a tick box exercise, and it's a brilliant document. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lacey. And, you know, colleagues, thank you all for your contributions to the development of the corporate plan, because it's also a very fine example of co-production. So thank you all for your contribution to that. Councillor Batruni.
I actually want to contribute on that point, Leader, because you're doing yourself a disservice. And I want to pay testament for you for actually making it a co-productive plan. It's very easy just to develop it with senior officers and sort of not open it up, but you opened it up to a lot of officers. We went to 2 or 3 meetings already, and the Cabinet, and we all had honest, frank discussions, and actually that's refreshing, and I pay testament for you for making that and driving that forward and making it a co-productive piece. And building on Councillor Lacey's point, you know, the 4 objectives, it's definitely not a tick box exercise, because we're already doing it. We talked about objective 1, growing city that offers excellent education. £34 million into education this year alone. Objective 2, reducing our carbon footprint and protecting our environment. 2.5 million, I believe, in parks alone this year we set aside in the last Cabinet, if I recall correctly. 3, as Councillor Lacey eloquently pointed out, about a supportive city with our communities. And I know other Cabinet colleagues, Councillor Marshall and Councillor Hughes and Councillor Harvey and Clark, we really deeply care. It really does. We always talk about personal stories we hear about residents and actually how upsetting it is. And we're determined, as much as we humanly can, to alleviate some of the problems people face. And as a Cabinet member for organisational transformation, the most vaguest of titles sometimes is... I oversee the equalities piece, and we had a strategic equalities group meeting this afternoon. I'm sure Councillor Harvey will attest to this. The amount of colleagues, officers there, engaged, understand their briefs, trying to work with each other to improve and become and really truly be an inclusive organisation was just amazing. And emphasised by, I believe, our community cohesion manager, who's been in post 2-3 months and looking to be corrected, who gave the most detailed brief you could imagine that left you with no questions, given his commitment to make this a conclusive organisation, but an inclusive city. And we're delivering. It's not just a tick point exercise.
Thank you for that, Councillor Petruni. And I think it really helps, doesn't it, to hear colleagues, reflect on what we're actually doing as an authority. When we're shaping these commitments going forward, it is so, so valuable to hear that and hear that it's already forming the base of what we do. So thank you for that. Councillor Clark and then Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Leader. I think also it needs to be mentioned what we've been through over the last few years and what possibly we're going to go through and the tough times we've got ahead. But there's wording here, fair and inclusive, a listening council, empowering each other. How key they are, those words, and a key for the residents to hear that. But I would stress that's nothing new to us, because this very runs parallel to our own manifesto. So this is nothing new to us. This is our values. This is who we are. So this is why we're fully behind this, and we absolutely support this. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Clark. Thank you. Councillor Harvey.
Thanks, Leader. Much of the same, really, as always. But the one that really jumps out at me is Newport's values. Everyone who works and represents Newport City Council will put the citizen first, focusing on our core organisation, values, expected behaviours, accountability and the ability to innovate. And we do that in spades. And I have said it time and time again, and I'm sure I drive these mad, but I will dare anyone to find me better staff than we have here at Newport City Council. And I don't mean just our officers, I mean our backroom staff, our cleaners, right the way through. Everybody does their bit. It might only be a small bit, it might be a ginormous bit, but everyone does their bit. We all welcome the positivity that everyone creates, because even when it was really bad and dark in the very beginning of COVID, yourself and our former Deputy Roger Jevons, it was a nightmare, it was hard work, and you pair bounced off each other really, really well and had awful decisions to make. Not any of us would want to make them, but you still got up, you got on with it. And I can't fault either of you or Roger in that respect. It was fantastic. And again, the way our staff went out of their way to help our communities, it was just phenomenal. And I will never be able to thank them enough. Thanks, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. And, I was just listening to you reflecting on how we value our staff across the organisation and reflecting on the point that Councillor Petruni made earlier, about the pay rise, our commitment through the pay rise, but also our commitment in really looking at their working environments and what we can do to support officers, but also what we can do as elected members, and all elected members, not just the Cabinet, all elected members, the role that we can play in giving that all-important feedback to officers at every level to ensure that they know that we appreciate and value the work that they do. So thank you very much for saying that so publicly here today. I do appreciate that. Are there any further comments on this item from colleagues? No? So are we content then to agree the key principles of the draft corporate plan and its ongoing development in preparation for our full consideration in November, followed by the full consideration of Council? Everybody happy with that?
Happy with that.
Yes. Thank you very much for that. So we move then to item number 8 on our agenda today, and this is our Strategic Equality Plan Annual Report for 21-22. And this is available on pages 135 to 174 of the packs that we have before us. And this report, colleagues, is our report again of progress against the Strategic Equality Plan 2020-24. Under the Equality Act, as you'll be aware, the Council is required to report annually on the progress it has made against the strategic equality objectives contained in the Strategic Equality Plan. Newport City Council's equality objectives were developed in partnership with key internal and external stakeholders and were subject to extensive community engagement. And as we've already heard today, the involvement of grassroots communities is something that's very important to us, as this ensures that while our plan delivers a strategic vision for equality in Newport, it also ensures tangible outcomes for communities on the ground. And the Strategic Equalities Plan annual report was reviewed by our Overview and Screening Management Committee in September, and their comments are included in the Cabinet report. Now, just reflecting on the report itself, I think, as we've already mentioned, over the last year, the impact of the pandemic did continue to present challenges in delivering against some areas of work. However, our equalities work continued to be flexible, responding to emerging challenges, particularly around access to information, education, and addressing Hate Crime Week. And I think it's important at that point to reflect that this is Hate Crime Week, so it's important to recognise the invaluable work that's been done across the authority in relation to this. And I'd really like to highlight the fantastic partnership working that we've experienced with Gwent Police on this particular issue, and thank them for their ongoing and continued support. And just to reiterate what we have said in the meeting to date, but also here and now, a very strong message to our citizens. We are here for you, we are here to support you, and we will not tolerate hate crime within this city. Just reflecting further on the report itself, I think there's many highlights, aren't there? And I know that colleagues will be interested in speaking on this, but I think about the inclusive leadership training that almost 300 senior leaders have been through. I don't like talking about me, but I have been able to play a role this year, actually, as a WLGA spokesperson for equalities, migration and anti-poverty, and have a real opportunity to influence government there. We've recognised significant events and significant dates, not just recognised, but also actively promoted these across the city. And of course, it won't escape anyone's attention that we've also moved to, wherever we can, recognising this also by lighting up our civic buildings to acknowledge this as well, making a really visible representation of support there for everyone across the city to see. I'm really proud to say that our good practice in relation to the development of fairness and equality impact assessments was recently cited in a national Audit Wales report. Again, another example of the fantastic work that our officers are doing. And I think something I'm particularly proud of is the work that's been going on in relation to participatory budgeting and the distribution of over £400,000 to community groups across the city. I do want to touch on our staff, though, and I know Councillor Petruni mentioned this, so I won't labour on it because I know you'll want to say more about this, but oh my goodness me, our staff are so wonderfully engaged. The networks that have been established and the time and effort that our staff are putting into this is absolutely tremendous. And this forms another important strand of this plan. And it also provides a platform for people who come from groups who may be underrepresented within our workforce, a real platform for them to have their voices heard and to make a difference to the work that we do as an authority. As you'll all be aware, and at my continued insistence, we continue to report on the advice and support that we provide to EU citizens and we'll continue to provide this support. I'm proud of the work that we've done here in Newport. We are an inclusive council and we are an inclusive city. We are a city of sanctuary, and we do welcome people who choose to settle here. Over the past year, we've supported over 2,500 people with floating support schemes, and this has enabled people to access and maintain accommodation and really have some sort of stability. In terms of our workforce data, our ethnic minority representation remains similar this year, despite a slight increase in staff numbers, and this is something that we continue to work on. I am really proud that our gender pay gap has reduced as well. We are making such strong progress here in relation to this throughout the organisation. And I'd like to emphasise also that in terms of delivering on the strategy, it's not something we do alone or internally, just internally as an organisation. Councillor Lacey's already given us the fantastic example of how Pride in the Port has worked with us to deliver a community-focused, community-led Pride event in Newport. What a tremendous moment for us, and what an inclusive occasion, and I'm sure that everybody who was present at that event would agree that. Now, it is important for me at this point to acknowledge the contribution that colleagues have made to this. And so before I invite our Cabinet Member to comment on the report, obviously this report is a reflection on previous years. So I'd just like to pay my personal thanks to former Councillor Mark Whitcutt, who started this journey for us, and it is important to recognise his ongoing commitment and to this. And I'd also like to pay tribute to my Malpas ward colleague, Councillor David Mayer, for the role that he has played in continuing to develop the Strategic Equalities Group. So both former Councillor Whitcutt and my ward colleague, Councillor Mayer, their efforts have been tremendous. And I am so pleased that Councillor Petruni is driving forward this work. So Councillor Petruni, perhaps you'd like to comment.
Yes, thank you, Leader. And you're right to point out that I'm standing on the shoulder of giants. So I hope to build on the work they have set out over the coming years. This report is the summary of the work we've done during the second year of the lifespan of the plan. That's the kind of catchphrase, isn't it? Lifespan of the plan. And we continue to progress the work over the next 12 months. And it's important for me to also recognise our successes, celebrate them as you rightly have done, Leader, but also determined to strive to improve continuously. Because the moment you think you're there, you're already lost, in my view. So, you know, I've noted, I attended the scrutiny committee and I've noted their comments around collection of data. And yes, we're going to get more in-depth information. I raised that a couple of months ago already. And I make that point only to say that our scrutiny committees are really important. They're not just tick box exercises again. I came from a council where you could possibly argue they were. Not here and not under us. We will listen to their comments and we will action where it's appropriate and reasonable. And I want to make a couple other points. Complaints data, we're looking to capture quality data from our complaints and compliments and comments if possible. So it's about tidying up that piece and capturing that data to ensure that we're always delivering the highest possible service and quality where possible. And to pay testament to the Strategic Equality Group, where I've chaired it twice, along with my Cabinet colleague, Councillor Harvey, with the staff that are highly engaged, and you're right, and the leader rightly pointed out, external organisations like Newport Live and what they do, and Gideon Calder from the Fairness Commission, right, good, got that right, and him on board as well, and listening and all the contributions. It's an important forum that listens to all the different perspectives and provides so much information in detail that just enriches us, enriches the council, and enriches this report for the years going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Petruni, and thank you for your commitment to this area of work that we do. Any further colleagues from wish to comment? I can see I've got Councillor Forsey and Councillor Hughes. Councillor Forsey?
Thank you, Leader. I would just like to highlight one part of that report, and that is Objective 4. This is about everyone living in Newport feels welcomed and integration is supported by local communities. So sadly, we've seen a significant rise in hate speech directed at LGBTQ communities. And to tackle this, we've provided training on hate crime. And so it's really important that we all take this training seriously and that we're aware of the consequences of our comments. It's so important that we respect each other. And I support the comment in the Local Government Association magazine the other day, which called for people to debate, not hate. We can debate with each other, but we can do so in a respectful way. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for that, Councillor Forsey. Councillor Hughes.
Thank you, Leader. I just wanted to say that it's, that a strong commitment to the Equality Act and an authority that meets its general sort of equality duty unites the city and makes it a safer place for all our residents, not just some of our residents. It's about all our residents. I think often people forget that. I think, the example that you gave of 2,665 people supported in our floating support scheme as an example. These are people with learning disabilities, they're refugees, they're people escaping domestic abuse in our city, they're children who find themselves in our city without parents. That's the reality. It crosses a whole spectrum. And while we're aware more needs to be done, I'm really proud that we're working with our communities and the commitment of our staff and colleagues to responding to this agenda. Leader, I will say that under your leadership especially, our Cabinet is wholly committed to supporting this agenda, and I've no doubt really that that we've worked, that many of us are doing, because working on the ground and seeing how the policies and the work that we're doing in Cabinet, we can see how it's reflecting in our community groups. Lots of us work on the ground with community groups. Tonight we're working with a local food bank, and I've seen how those policies actually impact and support those groups, and often those groups wouldn't survive without that support, and I think that's important to say. I want to share your thanks as well to Councillor Lacey. I think certainly one of the best days I've had in Newport in a long, long time, and I think to see young people dancing and enjoying themselves and actually really having a safe environment to express how they feel about life was just something beautiful to see, really, and I really, really appreciate all the work that our colleagues put into that. And I think, I'm convinced that under the leadership of Councillor Petroni there, that we're going to build on this success, and I'm really confident that we've got a council staff, council workers, really strong partnerships, and a Cabinet as well that is completely committed. Because we know that if we push back on that hate and if we push back on that division, we're going to have a much better city for everybody, which is what I said at the beginning. Thank you, Leader.
Absolutely. Thank you, Councillor Hughes. Thank you so much for that. And you've really captured our aspirations, haven't you? And with the commitment of colleagues, we're working closely to make those aspirations a reality. So thank you so very much for that. Councillor Harvey.
Thanks, Leader. Just to obviously reiterate, we had a really good meeting today. It's only my second meeting as well with the Strategic Equality Group chaired by my friend here. But it's so interesting when all these different people from different backgrounds have all come together and everyone seems to be on the same page. Everybody wants the same thing, but they're coming at it from different angles. It was really, really refreshing. I will embarrass him. Dan Harvey, no relation. The man is phenomenal. It was 2 months, Trace? 2 months. That man knew more in them 2 months than I picked up over 10 years as a councillor. I got to be honest. You would have thought he'd been there for 2 3 years. It was just brilliant. And my friend here, Councillor Lacey, actually updated us. There was over 2,500 attended Pride. As much as Dan thought maybe 5 if we're lucky. No, it was 2,500. So absolutely well done to all of you.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. And you know, it's really good to hear your feedback on your experience of that committee, particularly in relation to officers. Because if you think about some of the work that we do as an organisation, and we've talked about our corporate plan and the objectives of our corporate plan, actually, to be an organisation where people want to join with us and they want to work with us and work to drive the city forwards, that is so invaluable, isn't it? So thank you so much for highlighting that and really emphasising, you know, the quality and the commitment of those people that would choose to join us. So thank you very much for that. I do appreciate that. Councillor Lacey.
Thank you, Leader. I just wanted to take Councillor Hughes' thanks and take them, not for myself, but to pass them on to the Pride in the Port group, but also, again, similar to what I said about the last document, this isn't just lip service. We're living this document. Pride in the Port had 30 volunteers from this authority, senior officers, members, you know, they all came out, plus the people that came along as well. You know, we've got members who have taken in refugees, we've got members who volunteer continuously for hours in their spare time, do COVID vaccination centres. You know, we go out there, like I said, officers and ourselves as well, we live and breathe this document. It's not just a tick box exercise. And like I said, I will take the thanks that you've conveyed to me, but it wasn't, I was just the one that was running around asking everybody for everything, who then came and gave it to me. So my thanks goes out to everybody in this authority that made that day an absolutely fantastic day. So thank you.
Yeah, very proud moment for us all. Thank you, Councillor Lacey. So, are members content then to approve the monitoring report for its publication on the website?
Yep, happy with that.
And thank you all for your continued commitment to that. We'll move on then to item number 9 on the agenda today, which is the Climate Change Plan Annual Report. This was on pages 175 to 208 of your packs. And I hope that you've all had an opportunity to take a look at this, because this, of course, is our introductory annual report for our climate change plan. Now, just to recap, colleagues, as you'll be aware, as a globally responsible organisation, we declared an ecological and climate emergency last November, and we stated that we would develop a clear climate change organisational plan in consultation with our citizens for the next 5 years that will set out the actions we need to achieve this. In March of this year, as a Cabinet, we agreed our climate change plan for the next 5 years. And the plan sets out how we as an organisation will reduce council carbon emissions to net zero by 2030 and review the services the council provides to ensure that they support the city's journey to both net zero carbon and adapting to the impacts of climate change. The plan runs from 2022 to 27, and this introductory report sets out where we are at the start of the plan and also details some of the important projects that are taking place. The plan is a key document for us as a council and is now guiding our direction of travel as an organisation in tackling the climate and nature emergency and their impacts. I was really pleased to see this positive report, and I really do look forward to seeing how this work progresses in the future. And I know that there are others who are really keen to see our work on this as well. And once again, I would like to state that this is not something that is limited to the local authority, but it's something that we very much do in partnership with others. And we were delighted, the Chief Executive and I were delighted to welcome the First Minister to Newport this afternoon to meet one of our most wonderful and dedicated community groups who've worked really hard to establish the road to nature and help us in terms of delivering on our commitments in relation to climate change and the climate emergency across the city. So we're absolutely delighted that we've been able to bring together our community groups, the First Minister, so he can hear firsthand about the fabulous community-led work that's also going on here in Newport. I'll move now to the Cabinet Member, Councillor Forsey, because I'm sure, Councillor Forsey, you'd like to comment on this report as well.
Thank you very much, Leader. I'm really sorry I can't be with you in person today, but I would like to make these comments about the report. We have already made a substantial reduction in our carbon emissions, exceeding the targets set out in our carbon management plan. I look forward to further reductions as we continue to retrofit our council buildings and further increases in our electric fleet vehicles. However, there is still much more that we need to do as an organisation to mitigate and adapt to the nature and climate emergency. Our climate change plan sets us on the right path for this journey to ensure we act on behalf of current and future generations. As Cabinet Member with responsibility for climate change and biodiversity, I am pleased to see this positive introductory report, and I will be monitoring progress of the plan closely and requesting regular progress updates to ensure we continue to proceed at the pace that will be required. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Forsey, and I really would like to give my personal thanks to you for the way that you continue to champion this work. Your contribution really is invaluable, so thank you for that. Would any Cabinet colleagues like to comment on the report? Councillor Hughes.
As expected, maybe, Leader. So the energy crisis should not open up the door to betrayal of the UK's commitment to climate agenda. In Westminster, we see again a new government once again turning to fossil fuel solutions. In Newport, we've made a commitment not just to our obligations to climate, but to our children and to our grandchildren's future. The world is at a crucial moment, I think, for mitigating disaster, and that's the reality of the situation. Our Westminster government is full to the brim of those who simply haven't clocked the seriousness of the climate change agenda. Our cabinet in Westminster is a cabinet of net zero sceptics, even blaming the cost of living crisis on climate action. They're ignoring science and embrace social media sources. In Newport, I'm glad to say that our local authority continues to play its role and meet its obligations. And I thank Councillor Forsey and yourself and our staff who are amazing in Newport for their efforts made. And it's reassuring that we are still committed to that agenda where maybe in Westminster they've abandoned it. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Hughes, and you make such an important point there. But I have to say that, we recognise also your contribution to this important work. So thank you for that. Anybody else like to comment on this item? No. Okay then, so members happy with that report and look forward to continuing to monitor our performance in relation to that. We move to item number 10 then, which is the Gwent Regional Partnership Board Market Stability Report. Now this report, colleagues, is on pages 209 to 274 of the packs, and as you'll be aware, the Market Stability Report is actually a statutory document which Welsh Government requires each statutory partner to produce on a 3-yearly cyclical basis. A regional overview report must also be published on the same timescale, and local authorities are required under the Social Services and Wellbeing Act to work in partnership with health boards to produce a regional market stability report. Now, the report sets out the extent to which the Commission services are stable within the region, based on local footprints to support people in need of care and support. The 6 commissioning organisations in Gwent currently commission 106 care homes and 109 domiciliary care providers for older adults across the region. I'm sure you've all had an opportunity to read through this report, and actually in the context of the challenges that we face in the broader economic context, it makes very serious reading. Now, I'd just like to highlight a few areas from this report, and I'm sure colleagues will wish to comment on the report itself. So prior to the pandemic, there were few concerns with regards to care home vacancies and the financial viability of providers. I think we're all aware of the issues that our care home providers have faced and the impact that the pandemic has had on the stability of our care homes. One of the really critical areas that we're very conscious of is the impact on domiciliary care. And we still know that these services are at critical levels and sometimes unable to fully meet demand. Now, we know that this is due to a range of factors, including staff choosing to leave the sector due to poor pay, terms and conditions, and the costs of employment. That's what we've seen more recently, isn't it? With the costs of driving and registration and so on. And in recent months, of course, this has been further exacerbated by the cost of living crisis, particularly the rising cost of fuel. But this also means that this has had an impact on transfer of care from local hospitals, creating bottlenecks across the system. We know that there's currently an increase in individuals requiring care at home, and there's a concern that this will continue following the pandemic. Also of concern, as highlighted in the report, are the number of care packages that are being returned to commissioners. Over 70 providers returning more than 950 weekly hours per week. Well, the impact of this, colleagues, is that it causes commissioners to prioritise the most vulnerable citizens with complex needs. Now, the partnership approach with care homes and domiciliary care agencies that was established during the pandemic helped them to build a positive working relationship with providers to support them to continue to deliver good quality responsive services during a critical time. And it also, of course, provides a platform to engage with providers. Now, this engagement continues, but we do have to recognise the severe challenges that this system is currently facing. Considering children's services, we know that children's services are currently insufficient to meet the needs of the region in terms of residential services and foster placements. We've already had that highlighted for us today. And it's also been highlighted the lack of appropriate residential services and what this means in terms of children being placed out of county. And I'm really proud of the work that we've done across Gwent with our colleagues to improve and transform provision for looked after children here in Newport, a provision that is available to our partner authorities and the health service. And what that does is it actually builds resilience into the system. So I'm really proud of the ongoing work around that. However, it is important to recognise the ongoing pressures in relation to this. And the report also highlights the ongoing work in relation to mental health and learning disability services as well. And we know that as this report comes to us, it's also developed alongside our local and regional population needs assessment in order to ensure that we can actually target our plans. Now, colleagues, we've got an opportunity to discuss and debate this report today, as it will be discussed by all members of the Regional Partnership Board, and once agreed, a priority action plan will be developed. At this point then, colleagues, I'd just like to pause and introduce comments. Councillor Hughes.
Thank you, Leader. As you know, I've spent the last 25 years in social work, and you're quite right, the challenges and the situation we face at the moment in social care are utterly unprecedented, I think, in my experience. And I think the impact of the last few years on social care staff really shouldn't be underestimated, and it isn't, certainly by our city and cabinet. But I wanted to say really that we're very proud of our social care staff and the positive impact and contribution that they've made to the lives of our city's residents every day. This morning I listened to what was a gathering of social care staff in Newport, quite unique in my experience as a social worker. And I listened to social care teams talk about the successes in our prevention and inclusion teams, our youth justice teams, our youth and play teams, our adaptation teams and our residential teams. And our strong partnerships as well that we have with other agencies throughout the city and the contribution that they make. The reassurances, if it's possible to give reassurances at the moment, is that whatever the challenge is, our staff have shown before, through crisis after crisis, through austerity, through the difficulties of COVID, that they'll respond, that they're innovative and that they're committed, and despite the challenges, they will do everything they can to meet them, as they always have, Leader. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hughes, and you know, also thanks to you for representing us at our Regional Partnership Board. And I'm so pleased to hear you highlight the efforts of the staff across the organisation, because without their commitment, we'd be in a really serious position. And again, it is really important that we continue to demonstrate how much that we value the efforts of our staff teams, and also the pride we have in them as well. Many times during Cabinet we've spoken about officers going above and beyond, really, the call of duty in order to deliver for our citizens, and I echo your sentiments there, so thank you very much for your contribution. Would anybody else like to comment? Councillor Petruni.
Just building upon what Councillor Hughes has said, I just want to make reference to Newport's particular situation in relation to population change. So let's not forget, we are the fastest growing area in Wales, and we are the fastest growing area for young people. 20% growth, I believe, between 5 and 9-year-olds, the highest in Wales, double of Cardiff for young people, and that's positive, that's good news. But we also have 16% growth in over 90s in Newport. I've got the stats in here, 26% growth in over 70s to 74s. So we're a young city, we're a growing city, but also we have growing an older population as well, and with 14,000 I think we've grew. I think if you look at Gwent's figures, basically the growth is in Newport. And so Newport has a particular position in this market stability, but also looking forward. I think I'm talking about going forward. We really are the player in this, and we have to really seriously consider how we structure our services and how we deliver those services going forward. And I just want to emphasise that point, Leader. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Petruni, and I fully agree with you there. You know, it's really important that this contemporary data does inform our decisions going forward, and we ensure the services are fit for purpose for the future. Any further comment? No? Colleagues, content then to accept the report. Thank you all for your contributions to that. We move then to item number 11 on our agenda, which is the Newport City Council External Pressures Report. This was in pages 275 to 280 of the packs. And as you'll recall, colleagues, this is a standing item on our agenda for information, because it's really important that we continue to be mindful and aware of the pressures that our citizens are experiencing. So I'd just like to highlight really some aspects of our cost of living response. So as you know, that over the past 2 years there have been several global economic impacts relating to the pandemic, the ongoing Ukrainian conflict, and this has affected the global supply of food, energy and fuel. And we've already heard this evening, colleagues, clear attribution of how political decisions at the national government level in the UK have also contributed to this. Now, the rise in the cost of living is not only impacting households, but it's also impacting on our businesses as well here in Newport. And everyone, absolutely everyone, our households, individuals, households, businesses, and us as a City Council are all facing difficult decisions in order to meet our costs. It's really important for our citizens, I can't emphasise this strongly enough, that if they are struggling, we can provide them with advice and support. We can just get in touch with your ward counsellors, get in touch, just ring us, get in touch with the website. There is help and support available to you. Please don't suffer alone. Please get in touch. So internally, we've convened a task and finish group to look at the work that we'll do around that in order to ensure that we can deliver a coordinated response to the cost of living crisis. We've also supported Welsh Government initiatives in terms of the administration of council tax relief and a number of cost of living payments. We've made available to our citizens the discretionary funding, and we've also made further funding available to tackle fuel poverty and address some of the pressures on families at these times. And as you know, colleagues, it was a commitment of the Labour group in their election manifesto to accelerate the rollout of free school meals, and I'm really proud to say that here in Newport we're able to offer free school meals to all pupils in reception year 1 and year 2. So we're already starting to deliver on those commitments. We're also offering the pupil development grant to help towards the cost of school uniforms and equipment. We're working together with Gavo to ensure that the Community Food Organisation grant is distributed across the city to those organisations that need it. However, I would draw your attention to the fact that the report does also highlight how the cost of living crisis is impacting on our finances as a local authority as well. The report also makes reference to the work that we do in terms of the Ukrainian refugee support and asylum dispersal. And we continue to welcome Ukrainian families into the city who've been displaced by the ongoing Ukrainian conflict, supporting them in finding safe and secure refuge. And as colleagues mentioned earlier, many of our colleagues as city councillors have actually offered up their homes to welcome in refugees as well. We've welcomed many families into Newport and helped them to settle into our city, providing access to schools, healthcare and other services. Now, due to an increase in people across the globe seeking asylum as a result of global issues, the UK Home Office has announced a full dispersal approach which requires all local authorities to become asylum dispersal areas. As a City Council, we work closely with the Strategic Migration Partnership to consider the impact of these plans in Newport. In addition to this scheme, changes have been imposed upon the National Transfer Scheme for unaccompanied asylum-seeking children. And in August, the Home Office announced the expansion of the scheme for all local authorities, which will result in further pressure on placements for children across Newport. But I'm really proud to say that Newport, as a city and as a City Council, really took the initiative here in terms of providing support and places for those unaccompanied asylum-seeking children. And we've led the way, along with our colleagues in Cardiff, we've led the way in Wales for this. And I'm really, really proud of that and proud to be the leader of a city that is prepared to do that. As we've already heard, our teams and our services work above and beyond to collaborate and work together to ensure that individuals and families are fully supported and that advice and support is available to them. I cannot stress that strongly enough. And I know, colleagues, that you all share a similar view on this. So we will continue to receive this update report. I think it's absolutely essential that we continue to debate these discussions and raise awareness of these issues within the public domain. So we will continue to receive this report. It is an update report, so there's no decision as such to make on it, but I will open to questions or comments if anybody would like to comment on the report itself. Everybody content with the update? Okay, then thank you very much for that. And thank you to the teams that make all of that possible. Item number 12 then on our report is the One Newport Summary of Business. And One Newport colleagues recently presented to our scrutiny committees here as well, so just for your information. Item number 13. This is on pages 119 to 126, is the work programme. Are colleagues content to accept the work programme? And at that point then, I'd like to thank you all for your contributions today and draw the meeting to a close. Thank you all very much.